Do you ever feel like your childhood was never really yours? Like the days that should have been filled with wonder, play, and freedom were stolen from you. You were told to sit still when your body wanted to move. You were told to listen when your heart wanted to speak. You were told to follow rules you didn't understand, rules that weren't meant to protect you, but to control you. And somewhere in that silence, a part of you disappeared. The wild spark, the innocent laughter, the child who dreamed without limits. Instead, you learned to measure your worth in grades, in approval, in how well you could fit into a system that was never built for your soul. You learned early that being yourself was dangerous, and being obedient was safe. And maybe you've carried that lesson into adulthood without even realizing it. That quiet voice inside you, the one that whispers, "I want more," was drowned out years ago by bells, by lectures, by the fear of being wrong. But here's the truth. School didn't just take your time. It shaped your mind in ways you never chose. And until you see it clearly, those invisible chains still pull at you today. But here's what no one told you. The pain didn't end when the school bell rang. It seeped into you, quietly, invisibly, like ink spreading across paper. You remember the desk, cold, hard, too small for your restless body. You remember the chalkboard, lines and formulas written like sacred scripts you had no choice but to memorize. You remember the silence, how speaking out of turn wasn't curiosity, but rebellion. Do you see it now? That's where the fracture began. The classroom wasn't just a place of learning. It was where you first learned to betray yourself. You raised your hand, not when you knew the answer, but when you wanted approval. You swallowed your questions because they weren't on the test. You sat still, even when your mind screamed to run outside, to explore, to play. And little by little, you became two versions of yourself, the child who wanted to live and the student who had to perform. They told you this was education. But what it really was conditioning. Conditioning to obey. Conditioning to conform. Conditioning to trade your voice for survival. You see, school didn't only teach you math or grammar. It taught you silence. It taught you fear of mistakes. It taught you that your value wasn't in who you were, but in what you could produce. Think about those red marks on your paper. They weren't just corrections. They were tiny wounds. Proof that your best was never enough. Proof that perfection was demanded, even when joy was lost. Each red stroke whispered, "Not good enough. Try harder. Be better. Be someone else." And you believed it. How could you not? You were a child. You thought the teachers knew truth. You thought the system cared for you. But all it cared about was order, control, results. Do you notice how it still lives in you? That hesitation before speaking your mind. That fear of failure before trying something new. That habit of shrinking yourself so you won't disappoint anyone. These aren't random flaws. They are echoes of a classroom that never left you. A system that convinced you that fitting in was safer than being whole. And maybe, just maybe, you've carried this pain for so long that you've mistaken it for your personality. You call yourself shy, anxious, a perfectionist. But what if those aren't your true traits? What if they're scars from a childhood you didn't choose? Because here's the hidden truth. School didn't just take away your childhood hours. It buried your childhood spirit beneath a mountain of expectations. And unless you dig, unless you confront it, that spirit stays buried. Let's go deeper. Because what you thought was education was never really meant for you. School was not built to set you free. It was built to prepare you for obedience. Think about it. The ringing bell that controlled your day. The rows of desks that mirrored factory lines. The endless memorization that trained you to repeat, not to question. This wasn't an accident. It was design. They told you it was for your future. But the truth is, the system was never designed to nurture your curiosity. It was designed to mold you into something useful, predictable, and replaceable. Not a thinker, not a dreamer, not a creator, a worker, a cog in a machine. And somewhere deep down, you felt it. That restlessness, that whisper, this isn't who I am. But each time you tried to resist, you were corrected, punished, marked down. You learned to wear a mask. The polite student, the silent child, the perfect achiever. And behind that mask, your real self faded into the shadows. This is the truth no one told you. School didn't just teach you subjects. It taught you to doubt your own voice. It taught you that your worth depends on performance. It taught you to bury your spirit for the comfort of authority. And if you've ever wondered why adulthood feels heavy, why freedom feels foreign, why you're still afraid of being wrong, this is where it began. But here's what changes everything. Once you see this clearly, you can never unsee it. And that awareness is the first crack in the chains. And when you begin to notice those chains, you start to realize others have seen them too. There were voices long before you who looked at society, at schools, at the way humans are shaped, and they spoke the truths that no teacher dared to. Two of those voices still echo today: Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, not as distant philosophers in dusty books, but as companions, ones who seem to whisper exactly what you were never allowed to say aloud. Schopenhauer knew the weight of suffering. He saw how life, at its core, demanded endurance. But he also saw how institutions, like school, amplify that suffering by stripping away your individuality. He would tell you this: suffering becomes unbearable when it is forced into silence, when your true self is smothered under roles you never chose. Do you remember the feeling of sitting in class, pretending to care about a subject that didn't move your soul? That dull ache? That emptiness? Schopenhauer would call it the will being crushed. The spark of your inner life pressed down by a system that only wanted you to function, never to flourish. And then there was Nietzsche. He went even further. He looked at obedience, conformity, control, and he called it out for what it truly was: the death of the spirit. Nietzsche warned that when a child is taught to obey above all else, that child forgets how to create, forget how to fight for their own becoming, forget how to stand in the terrifying freedom of being themselves. You were told to be good. Nietzsche would have told you good was a trap, a label created to keep you docile. You were told to follow. He would have told you, follow long enough, and you'll forget how to lead your own life. Think about it. Every time you stayed quiet to avoid being wrong, you abandoned your will to power. Every time you forced yourself into a role you hated, you abandoned the creator inside you. Every time you settled for a grade on paper, instead of asking what your soul hungered for, you abandoned the possibility of becoming who you truly are. Schopenhauer saw the chains. Nietzsche urged you to break them. Together, they weren't speaking to classrooms or textbooks. They were speaking to you, to the child inside who was forced into silence, to the adult still haunted by that silence. And maybe you felt it, that faint rebellion, that quiet resistance that stirs whenever someone tries to control you, even now. That is Nietzsche's voice inside you, whispering that obedience is not virtue. Or maybe you felt the heaviness of life, the sense that suffering is everywhere and cannot be escaped. That is Schopenhauer's truth, but his reminder is that honesty about pain is the beginning of freedom. Do you see how their words connect with your story? School wasn't just a building. It was a machine that stole your curiosity, demanded your obedience, and called it success. But Schopenhauer and Nietzsche stood outside that machine and shouted what no teacher dared to admit. This isn't education. This is imprisonment. This isn't growth. This is erasure. And if you've ever felt weak because school made you doubt yourself, hear this now. Schopenhauer would tell you that your suffering was never weakness. It was the truth of being alive, distorted by a system that denied it. If you've ever felt guilty for resisting authority, Nietzsche would remind you, your resistance is not wrong. It is the only thing keeping your spirit alive. Because here's the deeper truth. What you felt in those classrooms, that suffocating pressure, that gnawing emptiness, it wasn't just you. It was the system. You were never broken. You were being broken. And yet, within that breaking, something survived. Something small, a flicker. The part of you that still knows you were meant for more than obedience. Schopenhauer gives you permission to name the suffering. Nietzsche gives you permission to rise from it. Maybe no one ever told you this before. You are not here to be a perfect student of someone else's script. You are here to become the author of your own. And that's when everything changes. Because once you begin to see the machine for what it was, you also begin to see its fingerprints everywhere inside you. This is the part that may hurt. Because school didn't end when you left the classroom. It followed you home. It followed you into adulthood. It followed you into the quiet moments where you still feel you're not enough. Think about it. Why do you hesitate before speaking your truth? Why do you check and recheck your work, terrified of mistakes? Why do you say yes when everything inside you is screaming no? These are not random flaws. They are the shadows of your schooling. You were trained to please authority, and now you please everyone. Bosses, friends, even strangers. You were trained to fear mistakes, and now you sabotage yourself before you even try. You were trained to obey, and now you shrink in the face of your own desires. Do you hear that voice in your head? The one that whispers, don't fail, don't disappoint, don't be wrong. That's not your true voice. That's the inner teacher you never escaped, the red pen that still bleeds across your thoughts. And when the pressure becomes too much, you call it burnout. But it's not burnout. It's betrayal. Betrayal by a system that told you to hustle over heal, to produce over feel, to perform over live. You carry these patterns like invisible homework assignments, decades after graduation. People-pleasing becomes your survival strategy. Perfectionism becomes your prison. Silence becomes your second skin. And deep down, you wonder why life feels heavy. You think it's you. You think you're weak. But you're not. You are carrying the weight of a system that conditioned you to forget your own strength. Schopenhauer would remind you, suffering multiplies when it is repressed, when you pretend you're fine while your spirit quietly bleeds. Nietzsche would challenge you. Every time you obey the voice of fear, you betray the creator inside you. This is why your healing begins with awareness. Because when you name these patterns for what they are, you take back the power they stole. You stop calling it just who I am and start seeing it as the conditioning it always was. And that's the turning point. Because once you see the pattern, you don't have to repeat it. Let's go deeper. Because awareness is not just seeing the chains, it's realizing they were never part of you. For years, you thought the fear, the doubt, the perfectionism were your identity. You carried them like names etched into your skin. But they were never you. They were lessons drilled into you, masks forced onto your face. And here's the quiet liberation. Once you see that these patterns were given to you, you realize you can give them back. You are not lazy. You were exhausted by rules that drained your spirit. You are not weak. You were silenced before your voice could grow strong. You are not broken. You were bent into shapes that never fit your soul. This is the beginning of awakening. To finally separate your true self from the self the system created. Do you remember that child? The one who wanted to play, to ask too many questions, to color outside the lines? That child isn't gone. They are still waiting beneath the rubble of years of obedience. And every time you choose honesty over performance, every time you choose curiosity over fear, every time you say no when silence would have been easier, you are letting that child breathe again. Schopenhauer's whisper comes here. Pain becomes lighter the moment you face it with truth instead of hiding it. Nietzsche's roar follows. True power is not control, not obedience, not perfection. It is creation. It is standing in the terrifying freedom of becoming yourself. And maybe, for the first time, you realize you don't have to keep following the script you were handed. You don't have to live as the student forever seeking approval. You can step out of the classroom that exists only in your mind. Awareness breaks the spell, and with it comes possibility. The possibility to unlearn the fear, to question the authority you once bowed to live not as a cog, but as a creator. This is not easy. Awakening never is. It hurts to peel away masks that have clung to you for decades. But every step toward awareness is a step away from the prison you didn't choose. And when you begin to walk that path, you don't just reclaim your childhood, you reclaim your mind. And that changes everything. Because once you reclaim your mind, the weight you've carried begins to loosen. The voice that once said, "Be perfect," softens. The fear that once whispered, "Stay silent," fades. Maybe no one ever told you this before. You were never lazy. You were tired of being forced into roles that suffocated you. You were never weak. You were silenced before you had the chance to speak. You were never broken. You were molded into someone else's design. But now, you see the truth. And truth is freedom. The child in you, the one who once felt buried, is not gone. They are waiting. Waiting to laugh again, to play again, to question again. Waiting for you to choose them. And this is your choice now. You can keep carrying the mask that school gave you. Or you can set it down. You can keep obeying the inner teacher that marks you wrong. Or you can finally listen to the voice that says, create, explore, live. Schopenhauer gives you the courage to name your suffering. Nietzsche gives you the strength to rise above it. But the step forward, that belongs to you. So if you're ready to reclaim your freedom, let this be your moment. Write it below. I choose my freedom. Because maybe school stole your childhood, but it doesn't get to keep your life.